Welcome to the Joy of Cruising podcast with your host, award-winning author Paul C. Thornton, a weekly conversation with the amazing cruisers featured in the Joy of Cruising books, comprised of The Joy of Cruising, Cruising Interrupted, new release, The Joy of Cruising Again, as well as other fun, informative global cruise personalities. It's the next best thing to cruising, hearing about cruising from the unique and diverse perspectives of Paul's amazing guests. If you hear about a cruise that interests you, book it at www.thejoyofacation.com or enter to win a free cruise for two. Again, www.thejoyofacation.com. We really appreciate your feedback, so leave us a text. Paul can't reply, but he may read your text on the air.
Hello, passionate cruisers. This is Paul, and I am delighted to welcome this week on the Joy of Cruising podcast a special guest, Magical Bones. We were introduced to Bones on our recent anniversary cruise to the ABC Islands in the Southern Caribbean on Celebrity Ascent. Bones was a headliner that put on a show that was spellbinding, funny, and captivating as Bones broke into breakdancing. So I enjoyed his performance, but I was knocked off my feet as he shared his story of growing up black in UK, getting into Bboying, and then into magic. Welcome, Bones, to the Joy of Cruising podcast.
Hey, I'm great to be here, man.
So great to see you again. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. It's the holiday season. It's been nice, and I'm feeling relaxed and ready for the new year.
Do anything special for the holiday? Did you perform it all over the holidays?
The Christmas period is a busy period for magicians, so I did a couple of Christmas gigs, but specifically, from Christmas Eve onwards to New Year's, I just spent time with my family.
Good. So what's happening with you these days? Anything you want to chat about before I pepper you with questions?
Right now, I'm just focusing on, new ideas for my magic act. I'm a magician, so I want to focus on some new ideas regarding that. I'm going to be putting some more content out for social media. And I guess this year I'll be focusing on that, like YouTube and Instagram and stuff like that. So working on some content for that. That's about it.
So we'll ask you later how we can follow you on social media. But so before we discuss your interesting upbringing as a kid in UK, and then your current life as a renowned entertainer, tell our listeners about yourself in general, where you're from, where you live, anything else you would like to share.
Well, I'm originally from United Kingdom, London specifically, and more specifically South London, which is predominantly a multicultural part of London. I'm from an area called Peckham, which has a high proportion of a black population of immigrants, and I'm born in the UK, but my parents are from Nigeria and they immigrated to the UK. So I was born and raised in London, grew up in South London, like I said, and I started off as a dancer. I was a Bboy, and I used to do competitions, music videos. I used to break on the street as well, do some busking. And then I progressed into becoming a magician. But before that, I always used to practice magic, but as a hobby. Mm-hmm. So I practiced it as a little kid. But it was just a hobby. It wasn't something I saw myself doing professionally until I sort of finished my dance career, and I started taking upon my magic, the things I used to do as a hobby. I started taking it seriously, I created an act that combines all the things I love. Magic, dance, music, community, and then that's how I come about.
Now, at what age did you start messing around, to use a phrase, messing around with magic, and what motivated you to work with magic?
Well, I started, like I said, I started magic when I was very, very young. My mum bought me a magic set. It was a Paul Daniels magic set. Now,
Okay.
Paul Daniels was a very famous magician from the UK. He was big magician on TV and stuff. And I got one of those little magic kits, took it home, practiced like crazy, played with all the tricks. I used to show my aunt magic in the living room. She was the only one that would watch. So she would be there knitting. She used to knit like hats and stuff, and she'd be watching my magic and applauding everything. And then what made me become a serious hobbyist, and what I mean by a hobbyist is specifically with magic, most magicians are actually hobbyists. And there's not many of them are professional. Most people do it as a hobby, and then we have serious hobbyists, people who really practice this on a regular basis. So I was a serious hobbyist, and what made me a serious hobbyist is actually my teacher in school. My drama teacher was a professional magician as well as a drama teacher, and he encouraged me and a few of my friends at school at the time to read books. I know not a lot of people read books now, but we were reading these magic books. From then on, he became sort of like a mentor to me, and I continued doing magic as a serious hobbyist, till my early teens, my early 20s, in fact.
When did you know you were going to be a professional magician?
It's interesting because that came much, much later in life. I never really saw myself as a professional magician. I thought it was a cool hobby. I was serious about it as a hobby, but it was when I used to be a dancer. I used to be a professional dancer, and I used to do a lot of music videos and shows and stuff, live events. And there's always a downtime period, and I would be showing magic tricks on set and stuff. And people would always say to me, like, "Yo, you're really good. Like, you should do this. Like, you should do something with this." And I would always be like, "I don't know, man. I didn't really see an avenue for me." And then what really got me into it was people like David Blaine, for example. He had a show on TV called Street Magic. I started doing, emulating what he would do at parties. I started doing like some private parties and private events, doing street magic. And then I started, also as a dancer, I was busking. I started bringing some of my magic on the streets. When I was busking, I was doing my dance shows, I'd start doing magic, incorporating a little bit of the tricks I learned. It just sort of evolved from there, from the streets. I started having more ideas, creative ideas. And as I got older in terms of dancing, and my career as a dancer was winding down, I just sort of, the emergence of the magic professionally came across. And so it was sort of an evolution of me as a creative, I guess.
And then you incorporated or you merged the two, the dancing and the magic.
Yeah, so my magic or performance that I do and the shows I do, in general, are a reflection of me. I think art, whatever it is, whether it's singing, whether it's dancing, it's storytelling. So in the magic, I like to tell my story. I tell people of me as a b-boy. I talk about my experiences with my parents. And so that naturally gets incorporated because through the magic, I'm storytelling at the same time. So, there's dancing in the show. I do backflips. So it's a fun way to sort of tell my story.
I'm going to come back to, you mentioned your parents. I want to come back to that, but let's go back a little bit because you've used B-Boy a couple of times. So this podcast is entitled Magical Bones, Magician, Illusionist, B-Boy. I suspect there is a portion of my audience, I'm guessing, that doesn't know what I mean by b-boy or what you mean by b-boy. So say something about that, and then talk about how that evolved into what sounds like professional dancing. I mean, you mentioned music videos. So say something about that.
Yeah, so b-boying, or breaking as it's called nowadays, is a term. Well, it's a part of a genre of hip hop, the culture, hip hop dance,
Uh-huh.
and it's the official dance of hip hop dance. So hip hop has four elements. We have rapping, we have graffiti, we have b-boying, or breaking as it's now called, and we have DJing. And that's a culture. Hip hop was born from the US in New York in 1970s. It was created by DJ Kool Herc. And, kids were breaking, or you guys probably know it as breakdancing. The reason why I say b-boying is because breakdancing is sort of like a commercial kind of name, but like b-boying or breaking is sort of the kind of the real name. That's how we pronounce it. So when I say b-boying, it might be easier to understand if I say breakdancing, but I tend to say b-boy because it's sort of like what the originals would call it. And b-boying, it started out in the Bronx, and it just took over the world. And it exploded in the 80s and the 90s, and then 80s specifically, and then it sort of like had a lull moment. And what happened is it came back in Europe in the sort of late 90s. B-boying came back in America. It sort of died down. People used to do it in the 80s, and it sort of left, and it came back in Europe in the late 90s. And had this resurgence. And in the early 2000s, that's when breaking came back into the limelight again because of Europe. And then America come back and were like, yo, we started this, and they they came back. And it's a global phenomenon. And I used to dance on the streets. I used to break on the streets. When I say the streets, I mean busking. So if you ever go to London, I used to busk the South Bank, that's where all tourists go. It's on the Queen's Walk, just by the London Eye.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in a crew called One Motion Crew, which was the name of my crew of dancers that I was in. And we used to just hang out on the street and just break. People would walk past and watch our show and put money on our hat, and that's how we used to make some change. Like I said, because of the resurgence of breaking in the early 2000s, you started seeing it in movies, and singers and would want breakers in their as backup dancers in their videos, award shows. So it had this kind of like resurgence, and yeah, I was a professional dancer, and I used to do a lot of music videos, dance with artists. And I had a fortunate career as a b-boy. I did a lot of good things. I did Madonna's son's 10th birthday party.
Oh wow!
Yeah, that was an experience. She hired us for that. We worked for some other events for Madonna as well. I did like the Brit Awards. I did many things. I mean, I'd have to look at my CV, but I had a lot of highlights as my career as a professional dancer. And that's what b-boying is. B-boying is basically breaking. It's a dance form, the dance form of hip hop.
I smiled when you talking about the origin of hip hop in the early '70s with Herc. I was living in New York City in the '60s and early '70s. So I remember. Well, I was young, but I still remember that time well. I was in Brooklyn.
You're from the heart of it, man. You're from the birthplace.
Yep. I like to tell people this. I lived in Marcy Projects, and most people all over the world know Marcy Projects is where Jay-Z is from.
Yeah.
Of course, I was ahead of Jay-Z, so it's just as much known for me as it is for Jay-Z. I kid. So you mentioned music videos. Did you get on any music videos that I could somehow find?
Yeah, I mean, I did my own music video actually. And when I say my own, it wasn't my music video. It was an artist called a group called Mint Royal, which is a popular group in the UK. And they had a song called, they had a remix of Singing in the Rain. You know, Singing in the Rain by Gene Kelly.
Sure, sure.
They did a remix that was huge in the UK. It's kind of dance me remix. It was an advert. And their music video, I was the lead dancer. In fact, I'm the only person in the video. So
Okay.
check that out. It's called Mint Royal Singing in the Rain. And you'll see me dancing in that. And
I will find it as soon as we hang up.
yeah, yeah.
You mentioned your parents, and I'll tell you, when we were watching you on Celebrity Ascent, of course, your act was great, but when you slowed down a minute and talked about your parents, I just thought that was so poignant, and I decided at that moment, man, I'm going to try to get this brother on the show. So I don't, you probably don't remember exactly what you said, but talk about what you took the audience through, and then say something about your act. Obviously, this being a audio podcast, I can't do justice to your act, but say a little bit about it.
We'll be right back.
The Joy of Cruising podcast guests receive a gift sponsored by GigSky of a 3 gigabyte cruise plus land data package valued at $60. Relying on ship Wi-Fi is slow, unsecure, and sometimes not available. And at foreign ports, travelers don't want to pay their carriers high fees. GigSky provides a solution that will save them a significant amount of money. To get your own data package usable on the ship or in ports, here is my link to GigSky. https://gigsky.pxf.io/NLOXOR. This can be found in the show notes below. For a 10% discount, use the code Joy of Cruising.
Yeah, so my parents they're Nigerian. So my heritage is Nigeria, and they emigrated to the UK, and they had pretty much every immigrant story across the globe, trying to go to, migrate to different parts of the world to find bigger and better opportunities for your family. And Africa's is a beautiful place, but there was opportunities in the UK that my dad and my mum wanted to explore, and that's how we came about in the UK. And my dad was a very strict person. He was an accountant, and he was a very, very successful accountant. In fact, he was the chief examiner of ACCA, which is there's two ways to get your accounting qualification. You can do ACCA or ACA. My dad was the chief examiner of ACCA. My mom, she worked in the Home Office. They were very strict on us as kids. I have two sisters, and they wanted us to, pursue a career of academia, understandably, because, in Africa, especially Nigeria, the only opportunities for success are, if you have a good job, like you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're an accountant. These kind of jobs are well-paying jobs. So that's what they wanted for their kids, understandably, to have higher paying jobs. And so I studied maths at Queen Mary University of London, studied maths. I got my degree. I say I made my parents very proud. And then I then pursued my career as a b-boy on the street.
What did they think about that?
My dad wasn't too happy. My dad passed away in 2017, but he wasn't too happy. He was a very, very strict man. But I think he would be happy with where I've come now, and made a success of my career, and I'm continuing to do that. So I think he would have been proud that the things that he instilled in me, hard work, discipline, consistency. I do my best to pursue that in my actual career. And yeah, my act. So my act is kind of it's a very, very visual act, but it incorporates all the things I love. So I try and bring a visual element to the stage as well as, the mystery about it. And I want people to have a good time. So I do things, traditional magic, like, I'll take paper, I'll turn it to money, or in America, I do dollars, single dollars to $100. I do those kind of street magic type of effects. I vanish a boombox. I've got some illusions in there. And I do my own take on card classics. So we have a card in Magic. We have a classic called the card stab, and what that effect is an audience member picks a playing card, and the card is remembered and then returned back into the deck, shuffled, mixed. The magician would then get like a long sword. He would then throw all the cards in the air, and he would thrust his sword into the shower of cards, and he would catch the card on the tip of his sword, the volunteer's card that was chosen. And I have my own take on that trick. I do a sort of bit of a mad version of it. I spring the cards and say I don't use the sword. I do a backflip through the cards and catch that person's playing card through the cards, the shower of cards. So it's a nice visual take and uses my skills as a b-boy. I like to break in the show a lot. So I do a piece where it's a memory piece, actually. It's based on maths. So I get a Rubik's Cube and I get the audience member to mix up the Rubik's Cube. And then I disorientate myself with breaking. But in this show, I explain that dance is actually linked with maths, with problem solving, movement in specifically. And this is a real thing. You guys can check this out. It's called movement-based learning. And what people found is that, movement can actually help stimulate our brains, and it does actually improve your cognitive ability. So if you're ever in a situation where you're stuck on a problem, it's good sometimes to just leave that problem aside for a bit, go for a walk, do some exercise, get the brain stimulated, acting, and usually that's all that needed to do to help you sort of kickstart those ideas. So in the show, I do this piece where I break blindfolded, and then I grab a Rubik's Cube and then solve it whilst blindfolded. And one of the last pieces I do, there's a lot of music in my show. So one of my favorite pieces to perform actually is I do this piece where all the music influences that I grew up listening to, hip hop, soul, R&B, I incorporate into card trick. And what that trick is I have a DJ who's mixed all these tracks into like a nice hip hop mix. And specifically, he's found tracks that have lyrics that allude to references of cards or numbers. So, for example, the King of Clubs, Jay-Z, there's one lyric that has numbers, 99 Problems. And what I do, I get an audience member to mix the deck of playing cards, and they return it back to me. And I then do some fancy shuffles whilst the music is playing. And simultaneously, I start finding cards, meaning I match the music, the cards to the lyrics of the songs. So it's quite a fun piece to do, and it's a popular piece in my show because it's different. Not many people seeing a card effect like that. And my final piece I actually do in the show is an illusion specifically inspired by a black slave, a former slave called Henry Box Brown. And
I remember that.
I'll tell you a little bit about Henry Box Brown just briefly. He was a former slave from Richmond, Virginia, and he escaped slavery by mailing himself in a wooden crate all the way from Richmond, Virginia to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where slavery was abolished. And not only that, obviously, he was a fugitive at the time because he'd committed a criminal act at that time. So he traveled across to Europe, to England specifically, and there he became a professional magician. This is in the 1800s. This blew my mind. So he became a professional magician in the 1800s, and his show was an anti-slavery magic show. So he used magic to, spread the word, about, he's part of the abolitionist movement, and he used magic, and he was there in the UK for 25 years and came back to America when slavery was abolished. Anyway, that's pretty much his story, but his story inspired many people. There's so much stuff about Henry Box Brown I could go into, longer than this podcast, in fact. But it inspired me because growing up as a young Black magician, I didn't know any other Black magicians. I didn't really see it as an avenue for black people. I just thought it was cool. It's a hobby. I love doing this stuff. It's cool, but it's not like a profession because, when you see magic on telly, it's always a white man with a black hat and pulling a rabbit out. Same kind of story. What I loved about hearing about Henry Box Brown was that, wow, like we had a Black magician in the UK in the 1800s. Wow. So that blew me away and inspired me to create my final piece in the show, which is basically an escape. It's framed as an escape in a cardboard box. I get in a cardboard box, I'm tied in chains and handcuffed, and I frame it as an escape, which it is. But I'm not just escaping from this sealed cardboard box. I actually have my assistant thrust 18 wooden dowels, wooden spikes into the box as I'm escaping. And the box, just to give context, it's kind of like, it's a small box, a removable box. It's just about got enough space for me to actually fit inside it, let alone have 18 sticks being thrust at full speed into the box as I'm trying to escape. So that's a tribute I do to at the end of the show for Henry Box Brown.
Yeah, I was somewhat familiar with his story, but I was not familiar with the magician part, the aftermath of mailing himself to Philadelphia. I had no idea that he went to UK.
Yeah, he came married, had a wife in Scotland. He did many shows out here. He was doing some crazy stuff, really, really, really cool tricks. And some of the stuff he was doing, I'm actually going to incorporate in my similar ideas in my newer show that I'm going to be doing.
At some point during the show, I remember, because you had like a video background, I think, and I don't watch these shows, American Idol, and there's several of them, but I saw one show where the hosts were all like amazed at what you do. Which show was that?
So I did Britain's Got Talent, and that's like part of the talent show series. So you've got America's Got Talent, Britain's Got Talent, and it has judges Simon Cowell, he's also a judge in America's Got Talent. He's the creator of the format and the series. And I was a finalist on that show, so I was very successful in the show as a finalist. And then they did a spin-off show called Britain's Got Talent, The Ultimate Magician. And what this show was basically all the best magicians in the world competing against each other. So only magicians and the best in the world. And the judges was Penn and Teller and a couple of the Britain's Got Talent judges. And I actually placed second in that show. So I just was edged out by a fantastic magician called Eric. Oh, what's his name? I've forgotten his surname now. But I don't want to. I can't remember his surname. But he was an Asian magician from States called Eric. Can't remember his surname. But yeah, I just edged to him, and his act was equally as phenomenal. He did a piece that got 1 billion views
Wow.
on in China. Amazing magician. But I was proud of that achievement because, I was runner up, and I was actually competing against some of my heroes, some people that I looked up to when I was younger were in that competition.
Mm-hmm.
It was an honor to be even on the same stage as some of those magicians. To place second is just, it made me feel it was a very proud moment for me. I won it, but next time I do one of those competitions, next time I'll try and win it.
Can the listeners find that anywhere?
Yeah, that's on YouTube. If you type in on YouTube Magical Bones, you can see all my performances. Magical Bones on BGT. You'll see you'll find it easily. The shows are all on YouTube.
There you go, listeners. We'll race to YouTube when this interview is over. So say something about, Bones, the highlights of your performing career. What's some of the places you performed, the venues you performed, and have you performed with any renowned artists? Not necessarily magic musicians or anything like that.
Yeah, so as I look back in my career, I feel like I'm midway through my career, but I'm very, very grateful to have, as a dancer, I did so many incredible things. I worked alongside Alicia Keys. I worked with Black Eyed Peas, big celebrities from the UK. I worked with Plan B at the time. I did the Brit Awards, which was it's like the British version of the Grammys. That was a big moment in my career as a dancer. And as a magician, I've been very, very fortunate to have done some incredible things. Like I have a TV show out called Around the World in 80 Tricks. That show took me all around the globe. It took me to Korea, obviously Europe. But being able to go to Korea was an amazing experience for me. I then was in a West End show called Impossible. And that show was another amazing experience because it was the first show in the West End for 100 years. And they chose 6 magicians to feature in that show. So being cast as one of the main magicians in that show was a big moment to perform. And anything you do in the West End is always a big moment. But to do a show, bring back a magic show, the first one in 100 years to the West End was a big deal for me. And I did that show for... Sorry.
If I can interrupt for a second, for the listeners, West End is analogous to the U.S.'s version of Broadway, right?
Yes, exactly, yeah. Mm-hmm. So we did that in the West End, and that show actually toured around the globe. So it took me to Dubai, Singapore, Beirut. It was an incredible experience to have done, and yeah, I also did a show called on the BBC, which is our flagship channel in the UK. I did a show called Pure Magic. That was fantastic. I one of my sort of craziest and proudest moments was closing for it wasn't the Brit Awards, it was the what was this? BAFTA. There we go. So the BBC's BAFTA Awards is like kind of similar to the to the Oscars, and it's as big as that in the UK. Winning a BAFTA is a big deal.
Okay.
And I closed the BAFTA Awards with,
and that was in front of a lot of stars.
All the big stars, all the big celebrity stars, all there winning the awards. Nerve-wracking moment, but a fantastic accomplishment for myself. And, I've done shows in Edinburgh, my own show, which one of them you guys see on when I do cruising and stuff. The first year I took my show's called Black Magic. The show that I do on ships and stuff is called Black Magic. And the reason why I call it Black Magic is really a celebration of the culture the Black culture specifically, and the magic within that. So that's why in the show there's a lot of music, because music is a big part of our culture. There's a little bit of history. Dancing is a part of our culture as well. So I celebrate Blackness basically, and try and share it with a little bit of magic and mystery as well. And that show did really, really well. Actually, the first year that show was in the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, that show was sold out for the entire run, and that was also a very, very amazing accomplishment for myself. So yeah, I've been, like I said, I've been very fortunate as a magician and a dancer,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm grateful for that.
Talk about how you came to cruise ships.
Cruise ships actually came about from the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. So the show Black Magic I did, which was a massive success in Edinburgh Fringe. And there was an agent out there that saw me and said, hey, would you be interested in doing cruise ships? At the time, I was just touring around the country and stuff like that. So it wasn't really something I thought about. But he was adamant that he thought this type of show, this type of act would be really cool on a cruise ship and different. And I work with Celebrity a lot, and I've worked for the last 4 years on the Edge class, which is the sort of premium type of class of cruising.
Mm-hmm.
And there, the Celebrity is really, really renowned for their shows. That's their sort of edge, no pun intended, too. They really go all out with their shows, their production shows. And the guest entertainers tend to be, people from America's Got Talent, Britain's Got Talent, The Voice, etc., etc. And, the high-end stuff. So he thought that would be a great place for me to, bring my magic show to the cruise market. They're trying to sort of, the Edge class is trying to attract a sort of a younger generation of cruisers and stuff like that, edgier. And and it's been great ever since.
Is Celebrity the only cruise line you work with?
I've actually worked with Princess, so I do a lot of Princess cruising. In fact, this year I'll be doing a lot of Princess cruises. So I've done their new Sun ship, which is again like Celebrity. It's a premium type of ship.
Right.
And I've done the Sky Princess, and it's been great. And this year I'll be doing a lot of Princess and Celebrity together.
Great. On the subject of cruising, I like to share with the listeners the guest cruising history. So besides performing on cruise ships, are you much of a cruiser?
I am a cruiser only because I performed on cruise ships. So I performed predominantly last year. I performed predominantly on cruises. So I'm what's called a guest entertainer. So I come on a cruise as a guest. I do a show, it's a paid show, and then I have a holiday. The guest. So I've only been on cruises because I've been a guest entertainer. But the fact that I've done for the last 4 years, majority of my gigs have been cruising. I am a cruiser.
What was your first cruise, and what was that like going on a cruise for the first time? Were you anxious at all?
Well, it was interesting. My first cruise was in 2021, July 14th, and it was during the pandemic. Oh, sorry, when we were coming back, we were just coming slowly emerging out of the pandemic. There was a limited amount of people allowed on cruising, and all the social distancing stuff was all involved. So I had a really strange experience coming onto a cruise. I came on Celebrity Apex, which was their second Edge class ship, and beautiful ship, gorgeous ship. But I came on, and the first cruise that I did, there was 400 guests. Bearing in mind, this ship holds roughly about 3,200 guests. With 400. So I had a whole massive, luxury ship to myself. We were, enjoying the whole, just small amount of cruises on this big ship. And it was a weird experience because I wasn't used to, like, when you go to the canteen and it's so many people in the sorry, when I say canteen, I mean the
Buffet.
The buffet. I wasn't used to all those things where it was just like, you were served at the buffet. You at the time we weren't allowed to serve ourselves, and there wasn't many people, so everyone could have a seat. When you go up to the pool, it was quite spacious. If you fast forward to 2020, end of 2022, early 2023, when we're sort of back in normal cruising in that space, I got to see, like, oh, this is a lot more busy and a lot more livelier. The audiences and the shows were fuller. It was a completely different experience from when I started cruising. And I think the experience we had during the pandemic is the only type of, it's a unique experience in general. I don't think many lifetime cruisers would have ever experienced something like that.
Speaking of the pandemic, the COVID shutdown greatly impacted us cruise lovers. You weren't yet cruising, but you were an entertainer. How did it impact your life as an entertainer?
For a while, it was a bit depressing. As a performer, you want to perform in front of an audience, and we were subjected to shows on a computer screen, these kind of Zoom magic shows. And it was great in that sense because, we adapted as a species. We all pulled along together to try and get out of this pandemic. And, people wanted to see entertainment. So I was entertaining I was doing Zoom magic shows. And what that would entail, what that would look like was, an audience all signed into Zoom, and I would do magic. I'd do visual magic. They would all watch me, and then I would interact as well, because magic is interactive. So I could interact with people by saying, I'd hold up a deck of cards to the screen and say, choose one, and then I'd make it, disappear, or say, think of something, and whatever they're thinking, I would reveal the word through the screen. So I was able to, adapt in that sense and still survive. But it was without audiences, man, in a real world, live setting, communicating and interacting with each other in the real world. It was it's quite depressing at times. Glad to be back.
When not performing, Bones, how do you spend your me time? Any hobbies, pastimes besides music? I know you like music.
I'm a fan of salsa dancing. I love dancing salsa. So I dance salsa now a lot. I play chess. I'm a big chess lover. So, I take that. Every time I find someone that plays chess, I'm always like, right, let's get to it. I play chess. I dance salsa. I'm a big fan of football, UK football, soccer, as you guys call it.
Sure.
In the States. So I'm an Arsenal fan. So I watch soccer, and then I chill with my family. I chill with my kids and hang out with my son. He's a Bboy as well. Yeah, great.
How, if you don't mind me asking, how old's your son?
My son is 7.
7. Okay. I know you like music. It was infused into your performance, and as you've said, you've been on music videos. What are you listening to these days?
You see, I'm still a lover of like old school music. So my playlist is eclectic. I do listen to a lot of the new stuff, but you'll find like Marvin Gaye in my playlist, my set list, Prince, Michael Jackson, Stevie, and then you've got hip hop. So I'm hip hop really from the mid 90s to sort of like 2012, 2015. I kind of stopped listening to hip hop after that because it's not the same. But there's Biggie, there's Nas, there's Jigga. It's a whole bunch of different type of music. UK music as well. I like a style of music called grime, which is our version of you could call it UK hip hop.
What's it called?
Grime music.
Grime. Okay,
yeah,
grime.
UK grime.
I hadn't heard that term. I have to look into. I do listen to some UK artists, but I've never heard the term grime.
Yeah, that's like the hip hop of the UK.
Uh-huh.
It's It's our sort of identity, and a few artists have actually crossed over. We have an artist called Dave. He crossed over. He did a song called Location with Bboy, and that was a big international hit. Um, uh,
Isn't Skepta from UK?
Skepta's one of the godfathers of grime. So
Okay.
Skepta's from my generation. So he was one of the people that brought grime to the masses. And like I said, he's kind of crossed over. He did a song with what's Rihanna's husband, Rihanna's guy's name? I've forgotten his name.
ASAP Rocky.
ASAP Rocky. Yeah, so he did that song with ASAP Rocky that did well. And Bright Skepta's he's has songs with Wizkid, and these are like international hits. So grime is similar to hip hop and rap. Grime was these little kids, these black kids in South London, in North London, just off their little rapping against each other. And 20 years later, now they're actually it's global music, which is an amazing thing to see.
Hmm.
Same with hip hop, actually.
Now you obviously you travel around the world as an entertainer. Do you do much leisure travel not related to performing? You don't have time.
Do you know what? I don't actually. I don't do enough, and I want to do more. I mean, last year I went to the Bahamas. That was purely leisure. But other than that, all the times I traveled was for work.
Do you have a travel bucket list?
Yeah, I want to do Japan. I want to do. I've never been to Brazil. I want to do Japan. Do Brazil. Parts of America I'd love to go to. I'd love to go to Louisiana, New Orleans. I've never been to Cuba. I'd like to go to Cuba. Yeah, those are the things that come to mind straight away. I'd say Brazil, Cuba, Japan for sure, and I'd love to maybe parts of America.
Bones, promote yourself. Any tours or events you'd like to tell our listeners about?
Yeah, so I'll be cruising mainly next year, but towards the end of the year, I'll do some select venues and do a brand new show. If you want to follow me, you can follow me on Instagram. I'm at Magical Bones on Instagram. I'm also on Facebook at Magical Bones. I mainly use Instagram, so if you do message me on Facebook and I take ages to respond or I don't see, I do check my Facebook, but if you want to get at me, you really should get at Instagram because that's the social media I use the most. At Magical Bones. Got a YouTube channel as well, which is at Magical Bones with a Z, and I'm going to be plugging that a lot more. So please check my Instagram to see, me plug that. You can come to get me at my website, which is www.magicalbones.com.
Well, great. Bones, before we let you go, a couple of fun questions, and then maybe an oddball question. I always ask at the end of interviews. First one's pretty easy. It's my way of getting some ideas from people. So, what are your favorite cruise drinks and
Ooh,
cruise food?
interesting. Wow. Okay. I'm not the most elaborate drinker. Pretty basic, but I do like Moscato, which I've had on a cruise. I don't know if it's
Uh-huh.
specifically for cruising, but I always have it on a cruise ship, Moscato. And my cruise food, I would say filet mignon at there's a restaurant on uh the Ascent. Well, they have it in all the restaurants actually, but yeah, the filet mignon at the in any of the edge classes. I love that. Mm.
I like the Edge class as well. I went on have you been on Beyond yet?
I've been in all of them. So I've been Edge, Beyond, Apex, Ascent.
Yeah, on Beyond, I went to a restaurant called Le Voyage by Daniel Ballard.
Yes.
And I tell people that some think I'm exaggerating, but I tell people that's the best meal I ever had in my life.
Oh
Yeah,
wow.
it was
Okay.
on Ascent. We didn't go to Le Voyage, but we did go to Eden, which is almost as good. Do you like specialty restaurants, or just the buffet and main dining room is enough for you?
Do you know what? To be honest, on the Edge class, the main dining rooms feels like specialty restaurants, but I do like the specialty restaurants. Like you said, Le Voyage, they're all good. They're all good, but um, I'd say the food in Celebrity is exceptional. So I think anywhere you go, even the buffet is pretty good.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so
yeah. That Edge class buffet is the best buffet there is, as far as I'm concerned.
yeah.
All right, second question. What's your most memorable or funniest or even most embarrassing cruise or port experience?
The most embarrassing experience for me was doing a Rubik's Cube trick and it um, going horribly wrong.
I don't mean to laugh, but
Yeah.
I can't. I remember the Rubik's Cube trick on Ascent. I can't imagine what it would be like going wrong for
Uh,
you.
there's
What happened?
there's many versions of that stunt I've done, that trick I've done. I've done different versions. The current version I do is the much simpler, straightforward version. The version I was doing then was I would bring an audience member up on stage and I'd give them the cube and I'd say they're going to solve it behind their back. And 9 out of 10 times, I'd put the cube behind their back, they'd mix it up, they'd bring it out, and it was solved. Magically, obviously behind this, behind the tricks, which I can't reveal, unfortunately.
Uh huh.
But what ended up happening with this gentleman is I brought him on stage and I said, yeah, mix the cube up. And let's just say, oh, well, there's two things. He didn't solve it behind his back, which was quite embarrassing. But it's fine because the audience don't necessarily, as a performer, they don't necessarily know where you're going with each effect. And because in my show, there's a lot of times when I pretend as if something's gone wrong and then it goes right. So they just thought, oh, this was another one of those moments. It actually wasn't. But he went wrong. He didn't solve it. So I said, okay, do you know what? I'm going to solve it. But the way to solve a Rubik's Cube, usually, if you ever want to know how to solve a Rubik's Cube, there's like 26 steps. And they're made up of what we call algorithms, which just means a sequence of steps. And nowadays, when you see Rubik's Cubes, most people use what's they're called speed cubes. First Rubik's Cube was this kind of really dry, like hard, large cube, and it was very hard to move around the pieces. And now you get these speed cubes which are oiled perfectly, and you can manipulate them very quickly with your fingers. This cube, because of the way I was doing the trick, which I'm not really going to reveal, but I'll give you a little hint, is this trick used an old Rubik's Cube. So this guy wasn't able to solve it, and I had to solve it. But because it was, when you learn how to solve Rubik's Cube, you learn an algorithm, you learn the algorithms, and it's muscle memory. So you don't remember the algorithms. Your muscle remembers the moves. Because I had because I had an old Rubik's Cube, I couldn't manipulate it with my fingers because it was like, if the sounds make any sense to you, if it would be, with a speed cube, it would be like cut, 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 cut. Where with this, it was like cut, cut, ah. So I couldn't remember the moves. My brain couldn't remember the moves. Cut long story short, I took 5 minutes on that stage trying to solve the cube. And just to give context, 5 minutes on a stage is the equivalent of 30 minutes, especially when something's going wrong. And I was sweating, and I was just like, the audience was just felt sorry for me. They were like, "Go on, Bones, you can do it." I'm meant to be this master magician, mathematician, and I'm taking 5 minutes to solve a cube. And an audience knows these kids can solve cubes in 30 seconds, 20 seconds now. So I'm there struggling, trying to move this cube around. And it was I think it was my second or third cruise. It was pretty embarrassing. It was a kind of horrible moment on stage. Couldn't wait to end that act.
I bet that's never going to happen to you again.
Yeah, I'm using only speed cubes now. And another moment with the hip hop story trick, I find quite funny but quite hilarious. was so as I said it to you with the hip hop story trick, the cards match the music, the lyrics of the songs.
Right.
But if you mix any of the shuffles up,
Right.
and you miss a sequence, you're playing catch up for one, and it really does screw up the trick. So what happened in one show, I messed up the sequence of shuffles. I was just turning over cards. People had no idea what the trick was because they were like, okay, there's these songs playing and Bones is just turning over cards. Is that the trick? I can do that, I can do music and just turn over cards. So yeah, that was quite funny and embarrassing at the same time. But it happens. It's live entertainment.
Yep. Well, the oddball question, and again, I call it oddball because it's not related to cruising. I know some of your social media following is listening. So welcome to the many Magical Bones fans. We certainly hope you have enjoyed listening to the Joy of Cruising podcast, and we'll come back for other episodes. Tell my listeners and your friends and followers, share one thing my listeners and your fans don't know about Bones.
I have a maths degree. You caught me off guard there. Let me think. Something that they don't know. They know I have a daughter, so that's not something. That's something. I'm stumped there. I'm trying to think because I've shared a lot in this interview. Oh, I was the long jump champion. And I held a record. This was like 13. It was quite good. I was quite impressed. It was like 6 meters 90. So yeah, I'm pretty good at long jump. So yeah.
There you go. I would like to think that your fans know you just a little bit better now.
Yeah.
Bones, thank you so much for coming on the Joy of Cruising podcast, and all the best to your exciting career. As I like to say, we will see you on the ocean.
Thank you so much for having me, man. It's been a pleasure.
The Joy of Cruising and Cruising Interrupted, each $16.99 plus shipping, and new release, The Joy of Cruising Again for $18.99 can be ordered at the link on thejoyofcruisingpodcast.com. For each of the 3 books, use the discount code Joy of Cruising Podcast and get $4 off. The Joy of Cruising books are also available at Amazon. Order the ebook at Amazon or your favorite online retailer. Stay in touch by joining the Joy of Cruising Podcast Facebook group or following the Joy of Cruising Podcast on Instagram. We're constantly adding new shows. Please leave a review and tell a friend about us. We hope you enjoyed this brief escape to the ocean. See you next week.